So Matt, this one's a long time coming. This is this is an epic, and this is maybe like the perfect Total Recall movie. To talk about.
No, it's the Phantom Menace, Tom.
Phantom Menace.
Long time coming.
Now, there's not we don't have a huge age difference, but I think we have enough of an age difference that like we kind of came at the Phantom Menace from like different angles. You know.
Yes.
I think like it would be safe to say when you saw the Phantom Menace, you would still be considered a child, and when I saw the Phantom Menace, I would be considered an adult.
Yes, I believe I was like 15 when I saw the Phantom Menace.
That's older than what I was picturing. So,
yeah, I was like, I think I was in 10th grade or 11th, probably 10th grade.
I think I might have been like 20 or something when it came
out.
Yeah,
I had my subscription to Entertainment Weekly at that point. I was like, still like, I was reading magazines.
Yeah.
Star Wars Insider. Hip to it as I could possibly be analog-wise.
Yeah, I came to this movie with a lot of baggage. I was like a huge Star Wars fan. Grew up with Star Wars. And then I remember the Star Wars drought, where it was like years and years without any Star Wars content. And then in like the early 90s, you start getting some Star Wars the Timothy Zahn novels. You get Dark Empire. You start getting like they were kind of like, oh, Star Wars, it's over, it's done. Like Return of the Jedi came out, and then like a year or two later, it's like, we're done with Star Wars. It's yesterday's news. Forget it, kids. And we're all like, we want more we love Star Wars. So I had the drought, and then in high school, me and my friend Chris started working on we're gonna write a script for the Clone Wars story of Star Wars, the prequel.
Wow.
And we're going to make a script that's so great that we're going to send it to George Lucas, and he's going to read our script and be like, I got to make this movie. Because that's what we thought. We thought that was the only thing keeping George Lucas from making one, is he just didn't have any ideas for it or something. He needed a couple of high school kids, a couple of sophomores in high school to come up with. So we worked, I had my own ideas. I had my own ideas of what young Anakin Skywalker was like, and it was nothing like this, and what the Clone Wars were like, and what all this stuff meant and stuff. So that's a lot of baggage.
That's a ton of baggage,
and all years worth of imagining and speculating, and then when you see finally what it is, I mean, I was,
Tom, I'm with you too, because I was born I was born the month that Return of the Jedi was released.
Okay.
So I didn't have really a drought, because I was, in that time, I was discovering the Star Wars movies.
Yeah.
So I was getting them for the first time.
Well, by the time you were 7 years old, the drought was starting to dissipate. We were starting to get the Timothy Zahn novels.
I was kind of occupied during that time, and my cousins, I keep mentioning their stuff. They had the Star Wars toys, so I was still getting Star Warsified. I watched the Star Wars movies for the first time, and then in that the gap when I became really into Star Wars was when the special editions came out.
Yeah.
Because I was into Star Wars.
Because then you could go to the theater and watch a Star Wars movie.
And I should have known something. I think I mentioned this on the show before. Because I was buying Star Wars VHS tapes, and I remember we got the trilogy, and there was this big plaster thing on the back that said this will be the final. This is before the special editions came out. It's signed by George Lucas. This will be the final time you can buy this in its original format. I'm like, what the fuck's he talking about?
And he wasn't fucking kidding about that. That must have been part of the contract when he sold Lucasfilm to Disney, because I thought for sure, especially with streaming, I thought for sure the first order of business would be okay, we got streaming of you can stream the special editions, but guess what? Here's the old edition. I thought for sure. It still hasn't happened. If I want to watch the original versions, I got to get out my DVD from 2005 that included the original versions as a bonus disc. And I think that was the last time they were available on DVD.
Yeah, because I was working, I think, at Best Buy when that came out.
Yeah, that's where I got it from, Best Buy.
And I was I need to buy these probably. Big mistake.
Yeah, exactly.
Big mistake.
Yeah, because who knew? Who knew he was dead fucking serious? Like, and it's got to be contractual. So, because like, why wouldn't Disney release them? You know, like, oh, and I thought like when Disney bought Lucasfilm and then didn't immediately release those, I thought, okay, they need to sell out of this like old stock, and then they'll release it. But it's like, no, we got Disney Plus. They could put it right on there. Physical media might cease to exist before they ever do it.
I'm still holding on to all my physical stuff.
I mean, you can. Last I checked, you can get those DVDs from 2005 with the original versions. Last I checked, you can still get those for like $30 or something. You know.
I need a copy of them.
Yeah, because it is like, it's so convenient to watch this stuff on Disney Plus, and if I'm in the mood for Star Wars, I usually end up watching like the J.J. Abrams sequel trilogy, because it's like I can just like put it right on the streaming. I don't have to get my DVDs out and stuff. But like I want to watch the original trilogy, but I get so bummed out, especially in A New Hope, the first Star Wars, when the digital when the improvements start showing up, I get super bummed out.
It's
yeah,
it's tough.
Here we came not to bury Caesar, we came to praise him. We're talking about the Phantom Menace. So like when I saw the Phantom Menace, I was having none of it. I felt my face like fall.
My mom picked me and my friends up from school after school. I remember us all getting in. It's like the build up, Tom. The build up.
Huge build up, and I remember like going to see The Matrix, and when I went to see The Matrix, I'm like, this is just an appetizer. This is just going to warm me up I've been waiting my whole life for another Star Wars movie. It's finally coming. I like this, and then seeing the trailer and being a little bit like, I don't know, but it's like it was like a glimpse that like maybe everything wasn't quite right, but I'm still kind of like, nah, it's gonna be great.
Same
it's
here.
Gonna be great.
I remember when the trailer premiered, it was before Meet Joe Black. Do you remember?
Okay,
that?
yeah, and you'd hear these stories of people coming in, buying their ticket, watching it,
and then leaving.
Yeah,
and then because I was like, once again, my mom and dad would like buy my cousins like the action figures, and so they were into me getting the action figures. Like, they're like, we did this when the original trilogy came out, and like,
right, it's like the next generation. Like you get to participate in Star Wars fandom. The way your older cousins did.
So it was exciting when like the Power of the Force like 90s line came out, and I was like, wow, this is cool. I'm like doing the same thing, and I loved it. I still love it. But then as it was going on, you get like in the Star Wars Insider, it'd be like the first image I ever saw was the battle droid on that like brown like hovercraft.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what the fuck is this? I was like, that's weird. Okay. But then I'm sure it's some cool aspect. And you'd see like Darth Maul, or you'd see like little like nuggets, and you try to like piece it together.
Yeah, that was like me with Return of the Jedi, because like I was real little when Return of the Jedi came out, but like my mom had gotten me the Bantha Tracks membership stuff, so I would see, and you'd see in like magazines and stuff, you'd see these little hints. You'd see like the skiff, and the fight on the skiff. You'd see like little bits and pieces. So like I was piecing it together, and like when you saw that, because one of the big problems I had watching this the first time was I was like, man, those robots are so wimpy. Like when the Jedi go like this and then they blow over, it feels to me like you don't need the Force to do that. That like a strong wind would knock these guys over. Like I wanted like big bulky IG-88 looking robots. Yeah, that like are like a real threat and are like, oh man, how are the Jedi going to defeat these guys? Instead of like, well, of course they were like nerd bots. They were it was like these robots modeled after Eugene from Greece. I was so turned off by those robots. And just the flimsiness of all the CGI, where it's like everything seems inconsequential. Now, when you saw the picture of that robot, what was were you just kind of like, oh, there's a cool looking robot? Or were you like, wow, that robot looks wimpy? Or like, oh, that must be like the new C-3PO or something, like
like I was, you just don't got any info. Like I'm just like, what is
he, a good guy or
good
a bad
guy? You didn't know if he was like part of their team or whatever. And then we were collecting those Pepsi. Remember they were on the Pepsi cans, and I collected like all the cans. I had them. I had some cans that were like filled, and I didn't open them. And here's a testament to it. I don't think we're sponsored by Pepsi.
Yeah.
Don't drink it because it fucking literally ate through the aluminum can. And like,
well, remember they had those Pepsi cans where you'd like pop them, and then like money was supposed to pop out.
I always wanted that. And then there was the gold Yoda, and this kid in my high school, a grade ahead of me, got the gold Yoda can. I remember him like running around the halls like showing the gold Yoda can off. I think he went $100, but he like carried like the Viceroy, and I'm like, this guy's gonna be cool. Or you see Darth Maul,
Yeah.
and then I was so like shocked whenever I saw episode 1. I was so like disgusted, but I was like in shock. It was kind of Emperor's New Clothes stuff. I didn't want to admit that how fucking like
You were in denial.
I was
you
in
were
denial.
like, it's good, it's good.
Yeah,
I like it.
I was like, this is good. It was kind of like, but I was just like, fuck, like and before I could like I was just like, it got hit in the chest, and I was like, but
yeah, it was like a bummer, and there is
sucked.
a point like the first time I watched it where I'm like, it's going to turn around, and it like never did.
I remember, Tom, whenever they go to fucking Naboo is when I like right at that point, like when they're in the woods before they go in the water, I'm like, we're in fucking trouble here.
Yeah.
Jar Jar
we're a third of the way into this movie, and it stinks.
It stinks. And like Jar Jar, for rewatching for this episode, I know we're here to praise him.
Caesar not
but
better.
I hadn't watched it in years, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna fucking just like soak this in and see it like, and I'm like, Christ on the cross. Like Jar Jar looks like I couldn't believe how much he was in the movie so much. Couldn't believe this made it to print. Like,
I mean, I never had that big a problem with Jar Jar, even seeing, because it's like, okay, he's the comedy relief character. That's fine. Like, you know, I wasn't a huge fan or anything, but it's like, I would have been okay with Jar Jar exactly as he is, and I would have been okay with him throughout that whole prequel trilogy if all the other stuff wasn't so fucking shitty.
That's what
it's
I
like all
mean.
the other stuff that like was killing me.
This Jar Jar unto himself is one thing, but like compounded with every other thing,
Yeah.
and it's like it's fucking
Yeah, like
it's
you can't blame it
insane.
on Jar Jar. Nobody else is really pulling the weight. Like, see, because I thought that you were like young enough where you saw this with like wide eyes and were like loved it. But since you were a teenager, and like when I was a teenager, like you know, I was like a little kid when Return of the Jedi came out. But when I became a teenager, I started to turn on Return of the Jedi as kind of like, oh, that's the shitty one. So and probably like around age 15. And age 15 was probably when I was writing my prequel scripts. So like, yeah, you were
I was already
the same,
obsessed with Star Wars,
but you were on the same side of like being like kind of like too old to be charmed by this, and being a teenager maybe like too cynical to appreciate what's there and only see what's not there. So we're kind of coming from similar perspectives on it,
because and everything like the
because like the people who love this movie are the ones who saw it when they were little kids,
yeah,
and sort of like you sort of love things unconditionally, and that's kind of why I wanted to talk about this movie again, because I kind of recently watching it, I kind of approached it from that perspective, because I thought of myself, I thought of like, I love Land of the Lost. It's very cheesy, cheapo, but there's so many like wonderful things, so much imagination, so many great things they do with a limited budget, and it's actually kind of like the imagination and stuff is actually superior to like more respected, higher budget things of the same era. And I kind of thought about Phantom Menace the same way, where it's like, yeah, like I was a little kid when I saw Land of the Lost, and so I'm older now and I can see the flaws in it, but I still love it because there's so much great stuff there. And I'm like, that's how like kids who grew up with Phantom Menace view it too. It's like I'm sure they're aware of some of the stuff that's like not quite ready for prime time, but it's like you love it anyway because there's so much good stuff in it.
And what makes me sad is that like stuff that I wanted this to be is happening in like Star Wars shows that are on Disney Plus.
Yeah.
And like the look and like the feels and stuff that came later, I'm like, where were you when I needed you the most?
Right,
I'm like,
yeah.
I needed like holy shit, if that had hit me like that when I was 15 seeing that in theater, I'm like, I'm kind of like mad that this is happening now when I
Yeah.
I don't know what the hell's wrong to complain about a movie, but I needed it.
Yeah, you needed the the J.J. Abrams movie would have been like gold to teenage
Holy
me.
shit.
You know? I would have loved a Star Wars sequel that kind of had the grit. Watching this now, I was kind of like, I just kind of took it on its own terms. It has a flow to it, and it does all work. Like if you came in with no preconceptions and didn't know anything about this stuff, I could see loving it.
Oh yeah,
because it's like Labyrinth or something. It's this like kind of whimsical kind of fairy tale kind of movie. Each part kind of leads to the other, and yeah, you're talking about the build up. Like when you would see Darth Maul in the trailer,
you're like, oh,
this guy's gonna be there, and it's like he's just like, we wanted him to be like the great adversary, be like the Darth Vader, but he is just like this tiny little element, like among other, like part of this ensemble, just like one little piece of the puzzle, you know.
When he died at the end of the theater, I was like, what the fuck?
Yeah,
I was like,
yeah. Finally, something you like in this movie, and then that's the first thing they get rid of. Yeah,
George Lucas is like, get this guy out of here.
So I mean, it does work, and I can see how George Lucas would make this thing and feel like, man, I just created something great, because I do like all the chances it takes. I do like the way it expands the palette of what Star Wars can be. Those nerd robot designs, like I was making Myth of Eight Opus, my comic that I did back then, around this same time, and I remember like watching this and seeing those robots, and I'm like, I know how I want the robots to be, and I'm gonna make. So I made robots in Myth of Eight Opus where they had like all these like big sharp gears and stuff, where they were so threatening and scary, where you felt like if you got too close to these robots, your arm would get like pulled into the mechanisms and stuff. Like I was just like, you could make such a great threatening robot, and they didn't. They made these nerd bots, and like my understanding is that initially those like Trade Federation guys were gonna look like a flesh and blood version of those robots, and that those robots were modeled after them the same way we would model a robot after us, and so that's why they look that way. But then when they changed the look of the Trade Federation guys to make them able to be like costumes that somebody could actually fit in, they kept the robot design but changed. So then you're kind of like, why did they create an army of wimpy nerd bots? You know,
right through the movie, I was just dying for them to be shooting stormtroopers and fighting and like slashing them. And the more that they beat these like robots up, the more angry I became.
Yeah, it was like inconsequential. And then also, like, you think about how hard fought all the victories are in like the old Star Wars movies, and then in this they keep getting out of situation after situation through like dumb luck, you know, through like like they don't have to like fight this giant fish. Just another fish comes along and eats it, and then they're fine.
And I know it's hack at this point to like complain about episode 1, but like, and like Anakin building C-3PO, I can't. That like I think I had a night terror where I woke up.
Well, I mean, George Lucas he's an offbeat guy. He makes offbeat choices, and for Star Wars, his like offbeat choices all worked. They all registered, and then sometimes the compromises they had to make because his offbeat choices didn't work, you know, made it more sort of palatable or whatever. But that, like, his initial script was that Anakin would be like Paul Atreides or something. He'd be like a teenager. He'd be on the cusp of like childhood and manhood, but he would be like he'd be like a teen. He'd be like Luke, you know, where he could like, you know, sort of fight battles and stuff. And but with this, it's like he did the casting process, and like something about Jake Lloyd just really worked, and so he went younger than what he had planned in the script. And I feel like I would have liked these movies a lot better if they had, you know, like a Hayden Christensen show up from day one, because then it's going from 100%. One actor to another. Like, you know, they didn't recast Mark Hamill in Empire Strikes Back. They didn't, you know, so it's like
Natalie
just for the
Portman.
continuity. Yeah, Natalie Portman. And then it throws off the structure of the thing. If Natalie Portman's supposed to fall, it gets like weird that like Natalie Portman is falling in love with this like little kid. Yeah, in the final scene, everybody's all dressed up, and then he looks at her, she looks at him, and then she bites her lip. George Lucas continued doing his George Lucas thing. He experimented. He created new technologies that had never been. He did that in Star Wars. He did that here. He takes all kinds of chances. He makes offbeat choices. He follows things in the spur of the moment, and it had worked one time, and it didn't. At least in my opinion, at the time, it didn't work in this one.
So he's episode oneing, but then there'll be characters like this guy or like the Rick Olay pilot that are like. They look like they're from a Star Wars movie.
Yeah.
There's a part where it looks like the J.J. Abrams. Like, you see, like, the robot, like, working, like... I'm like, hey, there's a...
We're just about there, yeah.
Yeah,
like,
we're right there.
Like, Qui-Gon was, like, a late addition to the script, too. All the Qui-Gon stuff, that was going to be Ben Kenobi.
Okay.
He was going to be the teacher. He was going to be the this and that. But then it's like... Liam Neeson was available. They create this character from... And he's great in this. He is really good. But it kind of sidelines Ben Kenobi. Like, you're kind of curious about, like, Ben Kenobi... You know, from watching the Star Wars movies, you're kind of curious what was, you know, Ben Kenobi and Anakin's friendship like. And he's kind of sidelined for a lot of the movie. But again, it's like like, George Lucas did Star Wars. Darth Vader was going to be the main villain. But then... he found out Peter Cushing was available. So it's like, let's create Moff Tarkin. Let's create a character for Peter Cushing. Dr. Frankenstein from the Hammer films, or Von Helsing from the Hammer Dracula. And so it's like he put him in, and it, like, that worked really nicely too, having sort of Darth Vader has this guy that he answers to.
Love it.
Like,
I love that.
Liam Neeson is like the inverse Moff Tarkin in this. So.
Dude, when I when I rewatched it, I was doing the soak in. I'm like,
yeah.
I'm just let it all in.
Take it for what it is, and not for what it is.
Liam Neeson had a fucking hilarious line read. Next time you watch it, you gotta. I swear, I don't know if I was like, I'm usually huffing gas when stuff happens on the Total Recall show, but he did a Norm Macdonald line read where Anakin was like, "So you're gonna get my mom free from Watto?" And he's like, "Nah." Nah. he's like, "Nah." He's like, "Okay." Like, he just said a "nah" was his response.
Now you have all these, like, that was the other, like, you know, C-3PO is a protocol droid. I have no use for a protocol droid. And then you know, Anakin Skywalker in, like, the exact same situation is like, I do have a use for a protocol droid. You know, I'm a farmer. I'm a farmer. I have no use for a protocol droid. It's like, okay, well, you know, that was Anakin's first order of business. He felt like his farm, you know, he felt like his mother needed a protocol droid. Like, you know, they barely can eat, and it's like, yeah, protocol droid. So and it's like, there's so many other ways they could have introduced C-3PO. Like, they have all these queens and ambassadors and things. And, like, you can't... There's no room for a protocol droid to be introduced that way.
He has to build them. And, like,
it would make more sense. Like, and R2's introduction here is kind of cool.
Yeah.
How he's, like, part of this trail of droids that sort of go out and they all get picked off, and he makes it... It is...
That
cool.
was neat.
Yeah, I like that. But it's like, it should have been the other way around. Like,
yes.
C-3PO should be part of, like, the Queen's entourage, and then he gets to Tatooine... And Anakin has built an astromech droid, which is this Swiss Army knife robot that would be so useful to, like...
Nah.
Yeah, it again, like, you take it on its own terms, it does work. When Jar Jar sticks out his tongue and Liam Neeson grabs it.
The pod race.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Like, you see it through a kid's eye. So, like, I get it that somebody who's, like, in their 20s now, who was, like, a little kid when they saw it, of course it's like their favorite. Yeah, it's like, yeah, okay, he made this movie for kids, and kids do love it, so you know, fuck off. What this movie needed, and of course, like, when you're creating something, you're not, like, George Lucas isn't as cynical as everybody thinks he is. He's not like, you know, he's not like, okay, I needed this and I need that. Like, but what this movie needed was, it needed, like, a Han Solo. It needed a character who's like, fuck all this stupid shit.
A rogue.
You know, you guys are assholes. You know, somebody that's kind of like, similar to the viewer, kind of like, what's this stupid bullshit? And that's what Han Solo was. And it's so missing, because it's like, this movie is populated entirely of, like,
goody two shoes.
Of like it's populated with like the Imperial guys. It's like the Jedis are all Imperial guys. Everybody's speaking very properly, and very well behaved and well mannered. Like you need a rough and tumble guy, and Jar Jar's not that. Jar Jar's something else. Like Jar Jar's not looking at this situation saying, "Oh, you guys are a bunch of assholes." He's an asshole too. He's a goofball. But like they are so fucking. Everybody's so fucking serious in this.
Yeah.
And there's no romance. There's no like classical romance of like there's no like swashbuckling or swashbuckler characters. That's what it needed. And maybe Ben Kenobi could have been that. Or if you're going to create like a Qui-Gon Jinn, maybe he could have been that, and then he gets killed. And
like the Oscar Isaac kind of.
Like character. Yeah, exactly. Like J.J. Abrams was maybe more cynical than and was kind of like, we need a Han Solo. So
hell yeah.
I mean, a lot of this technology is bleeding edge too. Like, movies that are made now and these like Star Wars TV shows that we love, that we buy into wholeheartedly, use technologies that were started here.
Pioneered.
So of course it's going to be a little quirky. Like in the lightsaber duel, you kind of see it where like Darth Maul will do like a flying kick, but like Ray Parks didn't really do it. Like Ray Parks went like this, and then they took that and then made him go like they took that digital image and then made him go whoosh, and so it looks off. It doesn't look right.
But then sometimes like Jar Jar looked like, I was like, he looks shitty there, but then like sometimes you'll see him here, it looks pretty good. Like
and I do wonder when it streams if there is any like, because with like a streaming show, you can like fine tune it day to day. Like you could watch it today and then they could like make some adjustments to it and watch it tomorrow. So I don't know if there's any of that going on. The other thing that like Anakin is like, one of his little buddies is Greedo.
Love that.
And I'm like, here's cute little Greedo. I don't want to see him get killed later on. He's a cute little kid.
Oh no.
But that wasn't Greedo. Greedo is in this. And I think maybe it's a deleted scene where Anakin gets in like a fight, or maybe it is in.
Oh my god!
Anakin gets in a fight with Greedo, but Greedo isn't the little kid that he's friends with. That's a different.
I always assumed it was just like a Greedo, his same like alien race.
Okay, because I thought it was Greedo.
I think that's Warwick Davis.
Davis, yeah. He also shows up like without a like as himself, without like a mask or whatever, as one of the spectators at the pod race.
Oh yeah, I saw him. I popped real hard when I saw him. And then also, why does Anakin force poor C-3PO to carry his flag out during the pod race? He's like,
yeah, C-3PO's barely.
Get your ass out there, 3PO. I was thought he like forced him out there. He's like barely holding the flag up. Mm-hmm. He's like, get your robot ass out there.
Now another thing, like because of the change to the script of adding Qui-Gon, I can picture the lightsaber duel where it's just Ben Kenobi and Darth Maul. Now, that was another thing that turned me off. First time. Like, these lightsaber duels need to be, like, one-on-one battles. Or 2-on-2, or 3-on-3. It can't be two good guys against one bad guy. Or it could be one good guy against two bad guys. I
started rooting for Darth
Maul. Because it's like, come on, guys, one at a time. You're ganging up. You know what it's like? It's like Night at the Roxbury. Like, it should be one guy with a lightsaber, but instead it's like two guys with lightsabers.
Well,
what is love?
You were
baby?
Right, Tom, because Darth Maul's at the at Mos Eisley, and Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan come up and start bouncing them back and forth.
Now
the Batabi brothers.
Now, like when I've had this conversation, in the past with other people, they always say, but Darth Maul has a double lightsaber. Doesn't that even things? It's like, no. It's like the weapon should, like, it's like, you can have a guy with a sword fighting a guy with like a spear or a cool chain or whatever, and you want it weighted towards, you want the bad guy to have the advantage. A double sword isn't enough to make it a fair fight of two guys against one. You gotta, like, it would make sense, Ben Kenobi with his one sword against Darth Maul with his double sword, and you're like, oh shit, Ben Kenobi's in trouble now.
Wow, I'm 100% Tom.
So then they have to come up, so like, they do start fighting them, and it's like, I mean, every movie or story or whatever with this kind of stuff, like, you're dishonoring yourself when you do that. That's not fair fighting. It is always like, there's always like a line where it's like, oh, the trial by combat must be decided. But I'd love to help my friend out, but this is how it is decreed. You must
2
fight.
on 1, you
Yeah.
bat, you fucking assholes.
What is love?
Love, baby, don't hurt
Yeah, they
me.
show up with
They're
their-
bouncing Darth Maul back and forth
And then they split them up. They get that like
with that like
that
shield.
which
But then
is kind of a nice sequence where it's
it cracked me up too, Tom, when I watched this again. When I was like, not the part where he was like, "Are you gonna free my mom?" He's like, "Nah." Not that part. But like, I got so much
backed up. Yeah, like if we
it's
did
like
the
therapeutic.
episode, if we did the episode back in like '99 or whatever, or
Yeah.
or '98,
But I'm
very different episode.
Watching it with fresh eyes again, I'm like just
Yeah,
soaking it in.
we've been through a lot of life since then, and kind of
Seen some shit.
Yeah,
But like the part, like the duel, like the great music, Duel of Fates. But it's like, once again, it's the ultimate battle at the end of this. Why do they even give a shit about Darth Maul?
yeah.
They're like, it's the ultimate fight, but like they don't like.
Yeah, they don't establish the stakes, like why it's important that they're fighting.
Who gives
yeah.
a rat's
Yeah.
ass? Like they barely even know this guy.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, this is it.
Yeah, I mean, when George Lucas wrote Star Wars, he like really like put it through the ringer. He wrote it and rewrote it, and he had like a very workable, very filmable version of it. And he's like, this isn't it. I got it. He's like kept doing it because it wasn't. He had this idea of what he wanted the thing to be, but he didn't know exactly what. So he just had to like write and then look at it and be like, this isn't it, and then throw it away. And so he did that. And I guess he didn't do that here.
Like it's the Duel of Fates. Thank God, Qui-Gon Jinn finally is gonna fight Darth Maul.
Yeah. When this movie was coming out, I referred to him, Darth Maul, as the Dark Lord of the Mall, because when you would go to the mall, you would see his picture everywhere.
Yeah, yeah, he was like front and center.
Yeah.
He'd be like on an end cap everywhere you. And then
Well, because he is like, he kind of stands
What a
out
cool
as this like
look.
very striking visual, and the imagery of the original Star Wars was kind of built around Darth Vader too. Like a lot of the posters and the album cover is like Darth Vader's face and stuff.
so awesome.
So like,
I
yeah.
wish they wouldn't have. I mean, I thought he could have been even more like iconic.
Yeah, they brought him back. I mean, I know that, like, so George Lucas, after this movie, I mean, it was a huge worldwide hit, but it was kind of like it took a critical drubbing, and it took a drubbing from, like, established Star Wars fandom, and George Lucas did course correct, and I kind of wish he didn't. Like, I kind of, like, I know he was course correcting to try to please people like me,
Yeah.
but I kind of wish he did, because I would have liked to have seen how this played out, because it's like, look, you're doing your thing, George, just like fucking do it. And again, as much as I didn't like this movie, I didn't want Jar Jar Binks deleted out of it. My disappointment wasn't with him; it was with like the Jedi stuff. It was like, this is not the way I envisioned young Anakin Skywalker.
Yep.
This is not the way I envisioned young Ben Kenobi. This is not what I envisioned as like the height of the Jedi. Those were the things I would have liked to have seen what Jar Jar's hero's journey would have been, like what would have happened in part 2 and but he got kind of really like scaled back, and
He really did.
Yeah.
It's like when I watch the other ones, I'm like, holy shit, they really fucking just scooped him right out of.
Yeah, Ahmet Best has become kind of like a folk hero at this point, because he was like, he got a raw deal. Like he was going to be a co-star here, and again, I think that I think he could have worked over the long haul. So I wish they hadn't. And there's like a couple other threads in this where
You're right. Other ills,
yeah.
like
He got the blame, but he wasn't the problem. And
when they do like the ESPN 30 for 30 on like Bill Buckner for like they don't talk about all the other errors that happen or bad things that happen. They just blame the World Series loss on Buckner. They blame the failure on Jar Jar.
Yeah. The other thing, like midi-chlorians, because like again, the Star Wars mythology, to me, it was like a religion. Like I so bought into all and like what the Force was and what it meant, and the Force as I understood it. And like in the Timothy Zahn books, there was this lizard that could block the Force. It was like they needed some mechanism to like, okay, how can we fool Jedi Master Luke Skywalker? So they have this thing that like negates the Force, makes the, and like I read that and I was like, fucking bullshit. That's not how the Force fucking works. There's no like the Force is just part of everything.
Yeah,
There's no animal that can make the Force disappear. Fuck you. The Force is like one of the basic, building blocks of the universe. And then in this, where they're like, oh, the Force, it comes from midi-chlorians. It's these little men that live inside your body, and they shoot out Force juice. I'm like, fuck you! That's not how the fucking Force works. That goes against every fucking line of every Star Wars novel I've read. Every fucking the role-playing game. The role-playing game doesn't say shit about midi-chlorians. Then it was like, and the name midi-chlorians. It sounded like mitochondria.
Yes,
and I thought of like mitochondrial DNA, which they talk about as like being the mechanism for Jungian memory. How you can pass on memories from like a mother to a child can pass on their memories and this mechanism. And it's like, no, it's not a bio. It's not an organism. It's mystical. It's got to be sort of shrouded in a little bit of. And again, like, I was so mad at it. But I mean, it's George Lucas's thing. So like, in Star Wars, it was vague mumbo jumbo. He had this vague sense of the Force of what it was. And then in Empire Strikes Back, we read the Lee Brackett script. Yeah. And it's like they refine the definition of the Force, what it is, what it does, and that's where they introduce. There's the dark side of the Force. There's a light side of the Force. They enrich it. And then, so it's like, now he's adding, it's like, each movie, you're learning more about the Force. And I'm going to teach you more about the Force. And it's like, there was this huge break in time. So this new thing that he's added to the Force I found very distasteful. Yes. But again, it's like, that's, it's like he's added, it's like, it makes it, and like his plan, George Lucas's plans for the sequel trilogy was going to be going all in on the midi-chlorians, and it was going to be like Fantastic Voyage, where like they shrink themselves down and they go to the land of the midi-chlorians, and it's like,
course corrected again.
Yeah, again, I having seen, like, I'd like to see that, like, I and especially now that we live in a time of Star Wars all day long, we get all these different flavors of Star Wars. So
can we get this version?
I would like, because we have a J.J. Abrams Star Wars trilogy, and we have The Mandalorian, and we have the various shows. Okay, now I'm okay with a trilogy focusing on the midi-chlorians. Yeah. But back then, when this is all the Star Wars you get, and also the idea of Star Wars being a trilogy, I always kind of felt like it didn't have to be a trilogy. George came up with, and then okay, now it's another trilogy and a trilogy of trilogies. Like, why does it have to be that? Why can't it just be Star Wars 4, Star Wars 5, Star Wars?
I know.
And so with this, it was kind of like, we wasted 1/3 of the Star Wars that we're going to get. We wasted 1/3 of the story of Anakin Skywalker, where it didn't have to be like that. They could have made 4 of them. Because, like, I wanted 3 movies of, like the Hayden Christensen. Yes. I wanted 3 movies of, adult or just becoming an adult Anakin Skywalker, where we get a full movie of Anakin Skywalker as like the face, a full movie of him as like a Luke Skywalker, Han Solo style hero, where he's just like doing his thing, and it's all great and it's awesome and everybody loves him. And then a movie where we start to see cracks in the armor. Yeah. And then a third movie where he has his fall or whatever. But because they like eliminated 1/3 of the trilogy with his baby pictures, we get Anakin Skywalker's baby pictures. So then they have to rush all that stuff in 2 movies. So he doesn't get to be a face in part 2. He has to be a face and an asshole, just super quick, one after the other in that, and then full asshole by the third one.
You're right.
And there's the whoops part. Like, that was pretty egregious to me.
Wait, where's that at again?
Whoops. Because he gets in a starfighter to fly and destroy this sort of, Death Star, kind of this mini Death Star kind of thing. And in the original script, where he's like a teenager or whatever, he's part of the attack on this ship. He gets in a spaceship and starts shooting it. Now, for some reason, Lucas rewrote it where it's like you can't have a little kid going out there to murder people. So it becomes all accidental. So instead of having this like Luke Skywalker style Death Star run where we get to like root for the hero and go Luke, and like he wants to achieve his thing, and then against all odds he achieves it. Instead, he's like, whoops, and then blows up the Death Star. Imagine in the first Star Wars if Luke, before he blew up the Death Star, was like, whoops.
I just remember his yippies.
Yippee!
Yippee!
Yeah, the yippie's fine. Like that's George Lucas. That's George Lucas. The Last Jedi, like
Yeah.
the second one, the Rian Johnson.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Rian Johnson Star Wars.
Love that one.
I love that one too. I like it. I like the JJ ones better, but I love the Rian Johnson one, and I felt the hand of George Lucas in there. It had like the yippies, like it had like the goof, because I think the goofiness is part of the Star Wars formula. It is part of George Lucas, and it's just like in this movie, just like the balance is a little off. It skews a little too much in the goofy George Lucas direction.
I kind of wish that like I thought George would have like George. He wrote Star Wars, then he had other people work on Empire and
Jedi. Yeah,
I'm like, he saw how well that worked. He figured he would just keep rolling with like the other.
I don't know. I mean, because like as a fan, like we wanted a George Lucas thing.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, and yeah, if he brought back Lawrence Kasdan or whatever, that would be fun or whatever. But you know, nobody in like the '90s was like, oh yeah, let's see, you know, like let's see George Lucas collaborate. They wanted a George Lucas thing, you know. So yeah, that's not Greedo.
No.
That's not Greedo. Yeah, Greedo, but Greedo is in the director's, like he
Wow,
is.
I didn't know that.
He is in
Holy
a deleted
shit.
scene where Anakin gets in like a fist fight with Greedo, and that finally established, because I was kind of like, man, I don't, this cute little Greedo, like I don't want him to die.
Yeah.
The Greedo that that Anakin fights is like, you know, he is kind of like a bully in it. So I love the lived-in look of the Star Wars movie. You know, that was kind of one of the signatures, is the lived-in look, and they're kind of like, oh well, that stuff's lived in because it's all these decades after this. This is like the golden age, so everything's fresh and new, and like I get that, but there was a time before this too. Like, can't some of these ships be a little bit rusty or scratchy? I guess you see it in like the pod racing, but
a little bit, yeah. Like that was a huge thing. I'm with you on that. That could have gone a long. Honestly, the lived-in look could have. Yeah. That would have like placated me,
right? Yeah.
Like a whole shit ton. Like every time I see like the shiny, like yellow starfighters, I get kind of like sickened. Like, where's the X-wing with the black like dirt coming?
Yeah, they're a little too like fresh out of the package. Like, and George Lucas, like when he talks about the criticisms that this movie got, like I understand, like George Lucas gave us a gift. Every single one of these is a gift, and Phantom Menace is a gift too. Like he's given it his all and whatever. And so if we tell him he sucks, you know, like we're wrong, because he's giving this is
a gift to the world.
But I think he like mischaracterized the criticism, because he was like, oh, everybody just wants it to be all Darth Maul all the time, and it's like, no, we don't want that. We don't want all Darth Maul all the time. We don't want a complete remake of Star Wars, but we want a new story. Feels like it's of a piece with what we've seen, and tonally too, and like a lot of the criticisms are of the J.J. Abrams one is like, oh, he just did a remake of Star Wars, which I don't agree with. It echoes with Star Wars, it's got references, but I don't see it as a remake of Star Wars by any stretch.
And like the Phantom Menace was like a lodestar or a turning point too. Like it gave me like I'm over like complaining about movies. Yeah. Like just this one instance in like
it wore you out.
It fucked me up. Like so I'm like kind of like I don't have it in me anymore to like after this it was like, but why do I give a rat's ass? Yeah. Like
for me it was like a loss of innocence, where it's like I thought, because like my whole life I was like, man, if George Lucas makes another Star Wars movie, it's going to be the greatest thing ever. It's gonna solve all my problems. It's gonna make life great. And then I got my wish. George Lucas made another Star Wars movie, and things were as bad as ever, if not worse.
I'm still feeling the effects of the Phantom Menace, Tom.
Yeah, I mean, I've maybe in a couple years it might, because I feel like I've come full circle, and like now I am completely at peace with it. I accept it for what it is. I enjoy, if you work on somebody's beloved childhood thing, even if you're the creator of it, you're gonna get shit. You know, it could be the hugest hit in the world, but you're still gonna get shit. And this was a massive hit, and George Lucas got all kind of shit. And as it stands, all these years later, I think it might be the best of the three. It's the purest. It's the most true to itself. There were elements in the other ones that were more to my liking, but it just it holds together as a whole very well. And you do want the whole to be greater than the sum of its parts, and I think that this has that. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
If I had to pick, I would say the second one. Whatever.
The second one's your favorite. I mean, prior to this rewatch, I would have said the third, because the third had the things I was looking for. It had the fall from grace, the lightsaber duel with Obi-Wan. The lightsaber duel with Obi-Wan was something, like, when I was a kid, I would read about in Star Wars fanzines, because George Lucas would talk about it in interviews, that, like, Obi-Wan and Anakin had this lightsaber duel above, like, a volcanic pit, like a volcano. And so, and you know, like, so he describes pretty much what we see here. Not beat for beat, but he describes, and, like, I incorporated that into my prequel script that me and my buddy Chris wrote.
That's sick, dude.
Yeah.
Dude, I would love to read that.
Yeah, I'll bring it. It's fragmentary, but my thought was that Anakin Skywalker is Luke and Leia's father, and then there's Padme Amidala is their mother. And in our script, you know, of course we had, you know, Anakin Skywalker was the dad, and then the mother, her name was Faye Talamar.
Okay,
Faye
that's
Talamar.
cool.
But visually, because I had done some drawings to go with it too, visually, Anakin Skywalker looked more like Carrie Fisher. He had sort of dark hair and kind of like, you know, sort of like, looked kind of like her. And Faye Talamar looked like Mark Hamill. So it was kind of like, you know, Princess Leia is her father's child, and Luke is his mother's child.
That's so
you know?
cool.
Because it's like, why does like the dad have to look like the son, and the mom has to look like the daughter? Like, why can't it go the other way? And so, and you know, like a tall, imposing, dark-haired, swarthy Anakin Skywalker, you know, was kind of like, I thought was like kind of like a cool image for this sort of you know, first trilogy, this prequel. And you know,
I remember when I would play Star Wars when I was in elementary school, and that was the first time I said episode 7. Like, in my head, I'm like thinking like, wait, there can be more Star Wars, and I'm like playing. I'm like, something can come after Return of the Jedi.
Yeah. Well, early, because you kind of think like, oh, well, where do you go after Return of the Jedi? Because Emperor's dead, Darth Vader's dead, Boba Fett's dead. You know, like where do you go? Empire's defeated, but you know, then Dark Empire, and it's like, bring them all back. You know, like you know, and then you get the J.J. Abrams thing where it's like, no, you just got to roll up your sleeves, do some work, and come up with, you know, a new cast of characters. I used to read like a lot of Star Logs and stuff, because again, I was so hungry for Star Wars stuff, and I'd read these old Star Logs, and they'd have like fan theories of what the Clone Wars were like and stuff like that. And there was one that was really good where they were saying, okay, here's what we think the prequel would be. It would be Anakin Skywalker is kind of like a Han Solo kind of character. He's a Jedi, and he's on these missions, but he's undercover. He's got this like cover identity as like this like smuggler or whatever, and he flies the Millennium Falcon, and so like he's doing these secret missions, posing as like a smuggler or whatever, flying the Millennium Falcon. So you got the Falcon, and maybe even Chewbacca, because Chewbacca's like, you know, 400 years old or whatever. He's in there with, and it's like, that sounds like a great setup.
Hell yeah!
I mean, I read this after my script. I would have completely like lifted that. But like I thought that was kind of cool. So you have like that kind of romantic character. You have sort of a Han Solo type in the mix, you know. And then Ben Kenobi can be sort of like the one who's a little snootier and by the book.
Love it.
And then Anakin can be the guy who's like a little bit of a renegade, walks the edge a little bit. And
please,
you know,
Tom, can we look at your script?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I'll fish it out. And like, and my idea for the thing would be that we sort of model the wars, the Clone Wars, you know, the wars that the Star Wars that Anakin Skywalker fought in.
Yeah.
I kind of modeled them after like the World War II, and then after that Korean War, and then after that Vietnam. So I could see an arc to the story where Anakin Skywalker's fighting in like the Clone Wars or whatever, and it's World War II, and like the good and evil of it is very clearly defined.
Yeah.
And it's like he is, and so by the end of that first one, it's like a pump your fist hero kind of thing where it's like, man, he kicked some ass. And then it's like, he's a warrior or whatever, and it's like, okay, time for the next war. And the next war is kind of equivalent to the Korean War, where it's like you're not quite sure, what the reasoning is behind. It's kind of ambiguous. I'm not quite sure, but it's like, he goes in and he fights and he's like, doing his best or whatever, but he's not quite sure exactly like why he's there. And then and then it sort of segues into like Vietnam,
okay,
where it's like he's in this war, and at a certain point he's like, I think we might be the bad guys here, and so you can kind of see how he would make his turn to the dark side, how that trajectory would take him to the. Dude, so that was like my arc.
That's good
for
shit.
It,
That's good. That's awesome.
And of course, the Clone Wars. I had all these ideas for what the Clone Wars was, and so of course I'm disappointed when I see the Clone Wars in this, and it's not, it's not what I imagined. But for me, the Clone Wars, it wasn't like they just have one copy of one guy that they infinitely clone. And me and my buddy, we were talking like maybe clone doesn't even mean a clone. Maybe clone is just the name of a planet.
It's an acronym.
Yeah, exactly. Like it could be any. Like maybe there's a world called Clone, and it's
cryogenic.
But eventually, our kind of thought was it's kind of like the Butlerian Jihad in Dune, where it's like in the backstory of Dune, they have all these robots, and robots fight wars, for the different civilizations in Dune. And then they reach a point, and the robots kind of go rogue or whatever. They reach a point where they decide, we can't have robots fight our battles for me anymore. And so from then on, it was like illegal to have like war robots. And I thought that would be like the Clone Wars, where it was, the Clone Wars would be like, they create these clones, and it would be like mutants. You could like customize. You could have like a giant soldier that had some specialty. You could have like winged flying. Because it's not about just like copying one guy, like, which made no sense to me. It was about customizing, soldiers to be whatever you want them to be, and then the Clone Wars are fought because some people felt that you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't have clone soldiers, and some people felt that you should or whatever. And then the resolution is that by the end of it, it's like the Butlerian Jihad. That's why you don't see clones in like the Star Wars trilogy, because they decided long ago that like we're just going to illegalize cloning and clones.
Dude, that's awesome.
Oh, thanks.
Man.
Yeah, I mean,
that's great.
It was so much fun working on it, and like we would have all these conversations. And again, like it's very fragmented. Like I wish. I wish we had seen it to completion and completed it, but it's something I kind of like. After we graduated high school and I went on to college, I did something, played around with it, drew some of it and did this and that. But then eventually, George Lucas made my work superfluous because he created his version. As well he should.
I forgot. You reminded me that all the stormtroopers were Boba Fett.
Yeah, again, like I don't get what the Clone Wars, like I don't understand the rationale behind what the Clone Wars are here, because it is kind of like, so we're just gonna clone one guy. We're gonna make like this guy's so fucking great. We're just gonna make copies of him and make like what was the point of that? Like, but I don't think I'm any kind of genius. Like what? Like to me, that's just the logical thing of what you would do with like clones in a sci-fi story called Star Wars. Is you'd customize the genes to make make a clone that can survive in the vacuum of space and fight. Like you all kind just mutants and whatever. Like it doesn't make sense to have copies of a guy with a New Zealand accent.
And also,
Sabu was here or whatever it is.
Boba Fett got popular after the fact, but he's like, I've always envisioned Boba Fett at the center of this. Boba Fett is the crux of everything.
Right? Yeah.
It's like
he thought he was giving the fans a gift. He's like, this will shut up the fans. They love Boba Fett. Like, I mean, it might be passive aggressive. He's like, you like Boba Fett? Okay, assholes. I'm gonna stuff
more
down your throat than you can handle. It's like when Homer is in hell and they keep stuffing food in his mouth, but he loves it. It's like you like Boba Fett. How would you like a whole army of Boba Fetts, you motherfuckers?
or he sits up in bed and he's like, he's actually like excited about it. He's like,
they're gonna love this. They're gonna eat it up. No, I think it was passive aggressive.
Like, I'm still fucked up over episode 1. All these years later.
Yeah,
it changed me.
You'll get there.
It changed me. Yeah, I can't be mad at a movie anymore.
Yeah,
after like the fans.
Yeah,
are
how can a movie disappoint? Like, but that's the thing. Like, George Lucas is coming at this from a very different perspective, because to him, Star Wars, he loves it. It's this thing he made. But like, he learned about Star Wars as he created it as an adult, where we spent so many, like, we've spent more hours with Star Wars than George Lucas has. Like, he can't sit down and watch Star Wars the same way we can. We watched it again and again. We built up this whole mythology in our heads, and he's not aware of any of this. So then when it comes time to make the next one, how could he, especially like pre, like, the height of the internet, like, how could he imagine what he was up against?
It was before. Yeah, could you imagine if this was released like
when there was like Twitter,
when
or whatever,
Twitter existed?
Yeah, because it was like early internet stuff. There was a lot of Phantom Menace hate. I mean, but even before the Phantom Menace, there was so much Star Wars stuff.
That's another thing. I didn't realize until like 7 years ago that there was even a problem with the Ewoks. Mm-hmm. Or like I didn't.
Yeah, and
I missed
that was something
completely.
I got kind of secondhand, because like I loved Star Wars unconditionally and never thought anything of it. And then when I was like a teenager, I was like reading an old Starlog, and it had like a review of Return of the Jedi that was It was like this issue of Starlog was from when Return of the Jedi came out. It was talking about all the stuff that sucks about Return of the Jedi, and it just never occurred to me in a million years. And I was reading it, I was like, yeah, they're right. Return of the Jedi fucking sucks. And I kind of hated Return of the Jedi until I saw Phantom Menace.
Wow.
And then Phantom Menace was like, oh, I didn't realize how good we had it with Return of the Jedi. Because like all my complaints about Return of the Jedi, it's like, at least it's not Phantom Menace. Like
I literally still, even when I heard about the Ewok hate, it's like secondhand kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Like, I still couldn't believe, like, I'm like, how could anybody have a problem with Return of the Jedi?
Yeah, that can be a separate episode, because I could go down the list of the problems that I had with Return of the Jedi. And again, when I was a little kid, loved it. Teenager, didn't like it anymore, and then now as an adult, I love it again. But part of it is like, it's kind of the same as this. It's like you want to see some cool fights. You don't want to see Jedi going like this and making these super wimpy robots blow away. And it's the same kind of thing. Like, stormtroopers have armor and stuff, so you don't want to see these like teddy bears with sticks, defeating the stormtroopers. You could have played it. You could have played the Ewok thing different, because originally it wasn't going to be Ewoks. It was going to be a planet of Wookiees. Now,
I remember you mentioned that.
Yeah, and I can understand a Wookiee kicking ass because they'll rip your arms out of their sockets. So like
that is interesting, because like the Wookiee planet looks like the Endor. It's pretty much
George made the call, and I think it was a bad call, but he made the call that like, hey, we've seen Chewbacca, and Chewbacca is a pretty hip guy. He can fix a starship and stuff like that. So we can't really have his planet be a planet of people who've like never heard of space travel or whatever. But I feel like he could have. He could have done that. But
that would have been awesome.
He had to like
reinvent that would have been
it.
Great.
So like I'm just in those scenes, I'm not like when the Ewoks, have those two logs that smash.
Yeah.
I buy that.
The logs that roll and trip up the.
Yeah, I buy those moments, but I don't buy the moments where they're like throwing rocks or they're throwing sticks at the stormtroopers. Stormtroopers, they have armor. Is that armor like good for nothing? Like they needed more. Like they needed the Ewoks to kind of. He needed like other ways to show them as being sort of like more formidable. And I mean, his thing with like the planet of Wookiees, it was going to be, I'm going to go to the planet of Wookiees. So we're going to teach them how to fly a spaceship, and then they were going to get in spaceships and then blow up the Death Star. So like. Why not that
fun.
with the Ewoks? How about get these Ewoks into some spaceships and have them join in that like attack on the Death Star.
Tom,
that.
this is your punch ups on Return of the Jedi are sizzling.
Well, I've had a lot of time to think about it. Too much time to think about it.
We love the Star Wars Holiday Special. We've already seen, Chewbacca's
Chewbacca's planet. So he has, he has technology and stuff like that.
or something.
Yeah, Kashyyyk. He has technology and stuff, but like, he'd still have, some people show up, or maybe, you got another. Maybe you have another planet of Wookiees where it's like, okay, we have Kashyyyk, and they're like the hip Wookiees. But then there's this other planet of Wookiees where maybe their fur is a little different or whatever.
Love it.
But they're still, maybe they're like Wookiees with like horns.
I love
or something.
Chewbacca, so more
like,
Wookiees.
Yeah, exactly. So like, you could have them show up at like sort of the backwoods, like the Wookiee cousins who have never seen a spaceship.
On a fan. What if they had a fan boat? Like some kind of like space fan boat.
Yeah, I get it though. I get all the I get the Ewoks again. Like I'm on board now. It's just. There was a moment when I was not on board.
And you're back in Ewok action.
Ewok territory. The other thing, Empire was so dogging the heels of like Han Solo and all of them. They were so like right on their back every minute. So it didn't make sense to me that like they sell Han Solo to Boba Fett, and then like Boba Fett sells it to Jabba the Hutt. So like the Empire knows there's this thing that might attract Luke Skywalker. So why wasn't there like a detachment of stormtroopers there waiting, kind of staking the place out, waiting for them to show up and then spring into action? Which I think that was an element, and that there are scenes of there's like the sandstorm scene and stuff that got cut out. But I think George Lucas did have a version of the movie where, when they're getting in their ships to leave Tatooine, that's when Luke gets captured by the stormtroopers and then brought to Darth Vader. But George changed it because he realized that this is going to be our last chance to see these guys together. So let's have a couple of scenes of them just kind of hanging out, like, hey, it's good to see you, buddy, before they split ways. So
we've got to do a Return of the Jedi episode.
Yeah, we'll do a Return of the Jedi.
Can we do like a full bore Return of the Jedi?
Yeah, because we're kind of doing half a Return of the Jedi episode here. This has been the Phantom Menace episode of the Total Recall Show. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you've seen like the way we've grown, and maybe you've got some new perspectives.
Therapeutic.
Those of you who didn't love Phantom Menace, maybe you feel a kindred spirit here, and maybe those of you who have always loved Phantom Menace and don't know what everybody's talking about, who hates it. Hopefully we've kind of created a bridge here. I'm Tom Scioli, author of Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics, and Fantastic Four Grand Design, and also the author of an unfinished Star Wars prequel trilogy with my buddy Chris.
That's awesome.
Oh,
we're going to do an episode on that.
Okay, cool.
I can't wait.
We'll have Chris in for it, too.
I'm Matt Zeoli.
And follow me on Twitter at Tom Scioli or on Instagram at Tom_Scioli.
Follow me on Instagram at Cinema_Tomb.
And check out my Patreon. See different comics and various in progress and unfinished things there.
Follow the show at Total_Recall_show.
And may the Force be with you.
Well, I'm going to push over the nerd bots.